Police are trialling facial recognition technology to see if it will help them in the fight against crime. Already in use in supermarkets, concerts and restaurants, campaigners say the technology is a threat to civil liberties and has reliability issues.
Trials have proved controversial. Opponents claim they're taking place in a legal vacuum.
There is nothing in UK law that has the words facial recognition. There is no legal basis for the police to be using facial recognition. There are no legal limitations on how they can use it, no policy, no regulation. This is a free-for-all.
I'd like to welcome in the studio technology expert Stephanie Hare, welcome, and also Tony Porter. We can speak to him via webcam. He is the UK Surveillance Camera Commissioner. His role is to work with the Home Office to regulate the use of video surveillance. Welcome to you. Before I talk to you, Tony, Stephanie, first of all, tell us a bit more about how this technology works.
So this technology is just going to be scanning people in real time on the street. And what's really interesting about it is you don't need to know that it's there for it to be working. So no consent is one thing, but no knowledge is another, and that's what makes it so powerful. You start to change your behavior when you're being surveyed. You also start to change your behavior when you think you might be being surveyed.
Is this something that the authorities should be doing? Is it right to use the technology in this way, or are they overreaching?
They shouldn't be doing it without it being something that we've discussed in Parliament and legislated, precisely because it's so powerful, but also because it's so inaccurate. It penalises women because it misidentifies women much more than it does men, so that's over 50% of the population. And it really is terrible. It underperforms terribly with people of colour who are already over-policed. You can't have a technology like that that's disserving over half the population in this way. And really, it's not great for the police either, because we need to give them the best tools that they can have to do their job. And we also want to make sure that the police have excellent relations with the community. This is the opposite of that.
Tony, can you defend the use of the technology?
There is legislation and there is law that does legislate for the use of facial recognition. So the Code of Practice I oversee, 12 guiding principles, talks about advancing technology being regulated now and in the future by the Code of Practice. It's also legislated by the Protection Act, which now, since 2018, covers the processing of sensitive biometric data, and it is also covered by such things as common law. The problem is, it is complex and it is confusing.
Peter Hitchens, do you think this technology should be used by the police if it can identify and assist the police in tracking down known offenders?
No, every fibre of my being revolts against it. It reminds me of the People's Republic of China. It improperly reverses the relationship between the state and the individual. The state should be the one identifying itself to us, not us to the state. And what appeared to be in that clip, which I've actually seen a longer version of, what appeared to be the arrogance of the police towards the man who declined to take part in the little experiment, is an example of the sort of thing which will happen more and more if we allow them to do this. The police have a simple job, and it's to prevent crime. They could achieve it very easily without technology by doing what they ought to do, which is patrolling on foot. They don't need all this stuff, and they certainly don't need to boss us around in this horrible Chinese way.
So, Caroline, there's a legal basis for this, says Tony.
It's a ridiculous argument. You know, talking about digital policing, analogue policing in a digital age, you know, walking down the street isn't digital, it's analogue. We don't need to be digitally surveilling people. We're not a police state. We shouldn't be, as we're walking around, having our faces, you know, digitally surveyed. It's just a nonsense argument. When people are talking about the need for digital solutions, it's because people are committing crime on the internet, not because they're walking around London.
Right, Emma, would it make you feel safer?
Not at this stage, but I do think we should look into all forms of technology that we can put on our streets to make us safer. But from that clip, which obviously a very distressing clip, I also saw the longer version. It's clearly not ready, and I certainly think we need to look more closely at how people who oppose that kind of surveillance are treated, especially if they're covering their faces.
But how can we ever justify just blanket surveillance? I mean, this is...
If you've got nothing to hide, people always say if you've got nothing to hide, what's the problem?
Well, I've got nothing to hide. I still don't want the police scanning my face. It's just an outrageous invasion of my privacy and of my rights to not have my face watched by the state.
I've got lots to hide, and so have you. If the police went into all your
you talk for yourself.
all your personal details, if the police said, "Can we see your bank accounts? Can we see your health record?" You say, "No, I'm entitled to hide it." We've all got lots to hide.
If we lived in a police state, we should all be alarmed. We don't. They're far too busy to bother about our things that we've got to hide.
Steve, how do you think police states come about? They don't come about by a sudden descent of the shutters. They come about by a steady slicing away of the freedoms which we have.
The police just utilising technology that is there and could help them, Stephanie?
Well, I mean, you have to sort of ask, at what point do we stop? Do we want everyone to give over their DNA? Do we want to have their face, their voice, their fingerprints? Because we could live in a 100% secure society. The police could just walk into your home or your business, search your devices, search your car. We live in a liberal democracy. We have had centuries, traditions in law that require agents of the state to get a warrant to do those types of searches. And what we all need to understand around this table is that scanning someone's face is not about their face. It's about identifying them so that they can be linked to all other data about them.
Right. Well,
whether or not it's legitimate to use this technology in the long run is a completely different matter. And I think there are judicial processes that will consider that issue going forward. But I think if you compare it to China, where there's 176 million cameras, I hear that facial recognition is of every street and every corner. That isn't the direction we're heading. But we do need stronger and more robust regulation to ensure if the technology is any use, it can be used to our benefit going forward.
Is that reassuring?
No. We have many millions of cameras in this country already surveilling us. And to be called alarmist and paranoid for pointing out that this is a very considerable increase in the power of the state over the individual seems to me to be a mistaken way of approaching the debate. Also, are these things going to be in use? Is there going to be any legislation about it? Or will it just happen, as so many things the police do, just happen? And we find that we've fallen into this without anybody ever being asked, as so often is.
That's exactly what bothers me. When I looked at the list of, places that they've done these trials, I was there. So quite possibly I hadn't consented to it. I had no idea about it. The first I heard about it was yesterday when this clip got released. I don't remember anyone discussing this in Parliament. I don't remember any legislation. I don't remember public debates. And suddenly I discovered I have had my face.
Would legislation help? If there was clear legislation, I mean, Tony says there's a legal basis, but if there was legislation around this, would that make it easier for you?
I'm always going to be against it. However, I would feel better if there was an actual public debate and we brought all these issues out in the open. And I actually believe we would end up not legislating for it because it's so clearly such a big mistake.
Tony, do you think there should be legislation? Would that make your job easier in that sense to sell this sort of technology being trialled?
Yeah, for the last couple of years, I have called for a stronger regulatory and legislative base that provides clarity. I've called that if it is to be introduced, it should mirror or at least be akin to that where the more secret surveillance is used, because overt surveillance, which is this, is now arguably more invasive. So I've made those arguments for 2 years.